students, in this module we are going to learn about attitude. Attitudes are our evaluations of people, objects and events in our world. They are based on our beliefs and feelings. Sometimes, but not always, our attitudes are revealed in the ways we act. While some attitudes are quite strong, come to mind easily and seem unlikely to change, others may be vulnerable to persuasion and therefore can be reshaped. In this module, we explore what attitudes are, how they are formed and how they work. To understand attitudes, we will have the discussions on the concept of attitude, structure of the attitudes, attitude formation and its processes, factors that influence attitude, attitude formation, types and functions of attitudes, attitude change, cognitive dissonance and attitude change, strategies for attitude change, emotions, that is how does it affect our attitudes and behavior, attitude behavior link, and finally can attitudes make predictions. The first one, the concept of attitude. To understand the meaning of attitudes, it can be helpful to look at different examples. Attitude can refer to your opinion about which political party does a better job of running the country, whether prayer be allowed in schools, whether violence on television be regulated, your opinion on the death penalty. Chances are that you probably have fairly strong opinions on these questions and also have similar questions like these. You have developed attitudes about such issues and these attitudes influence your beliefs as well as your behavior. Attitude includes how we feel about a person or situation, how we act in a given situation, what we believe and what is our viewpoint about a person or situation. It also portrays our mindset. For example, passion for a sport, dislike for a certain actor. What are attitudes? Attitude is a word derived from the Latin aptus, which means fit and ready for action. This ancient meaning refers to something that is directly observable, such as the way a fighter moves in the boxing ring. However, attitude acts as a construct that, although not directly observable, precedes behavior and guides our choices and decisions for action. Gordon Allport, that is in 1935, defined attitude as mental and neural state of readiness organized through experience exerting a directive or dynamic influence upon the individual's response to all objects and situations with which it is related. Let us see structure of the attitudes. A widely held view of an attitude's anatomy is the three-component attitude model consisting of an affective, that is feeling component, positive or negative feelings associated with the object of an attitude. The second one, a behavioral, that is acting component, a state of readiness to take action, how attitude influences your behavior. The third one, a cognitive, that is thinking component, that means beliefs about the object of an attitude. As well as the three components, this approach also emphasized that attitudes are relatively permanent, that is, they persist across time and situations. A momentary feeling is not an attitude, limited to socially significant events or objects, generalizable and at least somewhat abstract. If you drop a book on your toe and find that it hurts, this is not enough to form an attitude, because it is a single event in one place and at one time. But if the experience makes you dislike books or libraries or clumsiness in general, then that dislike is an attitude. Each attitude then is made up of thoughts and ideas, a cluster of feelings, likes and dislikes and behavioral intentions. Now we will see the attitude formation. Several factors can influence how and why attitudes form. That includes the first one, experience. As a result of direct personal experience or maybe the result of observation, attitudes are formed directly through our experience. The second one, social factors. Social roles and social norms can have a strong influence on attitudes. Social roles relate to how people are expected to behave in a particular role or context. Social norms involve society's rules for what behaviors are considered appropriate. For example, a politician's attitude towards doing service to the people. The next one, learning. Attitudes can be learned in a variety of ways. Advertisers use classical conditioning to influence your attitude towards a particular product. In a television commercial, you see a young beautiful people having fun on a tropical beach while enjoying a sports drink. This attractive and appealing imagery causes you to develop a positive association with this particular beverage. Next one, classical conditioning. It involves involuntary responses and is acquired through the pairing of stimuli. Example, Pavlov's experiment, wherein his dog started to salivate when he rang a bell. Stimulus is paired with the conditioned response. Smartphone tones and vibes and celebrities in advertising are few examples. The next one, operant conditioning. Operant conditioning can also be used to influence how attitudes develop. Imagine a young man who has just started smoking. Whenever he lights up a cigarette, people complain, chastise him and ask him to leave their vicinity. This negative feedback from those around him eventually causes him to develop an unfavorable opinion of smoking and he decides to give up the habit. Personal experiences. Personal experiences play a crucial role in attitude formation. For example, if Raj was provided emotional support by his friend in times of need, then it is most likely that Raj will develop trust in people and will be there for others in times of need. The next one, media. Media related influences have become an important factor in influencing attitude formation, especially in times of technological advancement, as audio-visual media and the internet have become very powerful sources of attitude formation. For example, if the media highlights the high recovery rate of coronavirus, then people will be less scared and more relaxed. The next one, observation. Finally, people also learn attitudes by observing people around them. When someone you admire greatly espouses a particular attitude, you are more likely to develop the same beliefs. For example, children spend a great deal of time observing the attitudes of their parents and teachers and usually begin to demonstrate similar outlooks. Now we will see the process of attitude formation. Learning attitudes by association. This is definitely evident when a student likes a subject because he or she likes the teacher teaching that subject. Thus, this positive association also helps the students in learning the subject. Learning attitudes through exposure to information. Attitudes are also learned by exposure to information apart from the physical presence of others. For example, reading about relationships would help us in understanding its importance in our life. Learning attitudes by group or cultural norms. We learn attitudes through group or cultural norms. Norms are unwritten social rules which everyone is supposed to adhere to under specific situations. Doing prayer daily is a must in some religions, and children, by seeing their parents doing prayer daily, develop a positive attitude towards prayer. Learning attitudes through modeling. We also learn attitudes by observing others. For example, children can learn generosity by observing the pro-social behavior of their parents. Learning attitudes through reward and punishment. If a child is appreciated for his or her particular attitude, then he or she will continue it further. For example, rewarding a child when he scores good marks in exams, whereas if a child is scolded for spending too much time on social media, then he or she will develop a negative attitude towards it. Next, we will see the types of attitudes. Attitudes can be either explicit, deliberately formed, or implicit, unconsciously formed. The first, we will see explicit attitude. Explicit attitudes are deliberately formed attitudes that an individual is aware of having, and they can be measured by our self-report and questionnaires. Generally, we express our attitudes as per our wish. We are aware of our attitudes and their influences on our behavior. Such attitudes are known as explicit attitude. Since the explicit attitudes function on the conscious level, we are aware of their cognitive processing and their impact on our behavior. Explicit attitudes are activated by control process of evaluation and execution. For example, we may be aware of our view and feelings towards a particular brand of toothpaste, and accordingly this leads us to a specific behavior towards, that is, buying or not buying toothpaste of that brand. Next, implicit attitude. People may not be aware of their implicit attitudes, so they must be measured using sophisticated methods that can access unconscious thoughts and feelings, such as response to stimuli. However, there are many other attitudes that function at the unconscious level. These attitudes are called as implicit attitude. Contrary to the explicit attitudes, implicit attitudes are under control of automatically activated evaluation and executed in behavior without the awareness of the person holding that attitude. Thus, implicit attitudes automatically affect behaviors without conscious thought and below the level of awareness. It is assumed that in the process of developing new attitudes, people usually erase and override the old attitudes with the new ones. However, a model of dual attitudes, when a new attitude is developed, it does not erase the old one. Instead, the two attitudes coexist. The new attitude becomes the explicit attitude, whereas the old attitudes are still in memory and function as an implicit attitude. Next, we will see the functions of attitudes. Attitudes are formed through learning and are retained even for a lifetime. They in many cases become part of the core of ourself. They serve a number of functions for the individual. The first one, adaptive and instrumental function. Favorable attitudes are developed towards rewarding objects and unfavorable attitudes toward objects that thwart or punish us. In this process, people learn socially acceptable views, opinions and attitudes. A student learns to express positive attitude toward the school discipline when he or she is rewarded for doing so and is punished for not behaving accordingly. The next one, knowledge function. Attitudes function as simplified categories for various social stimuli, that is people, events, situations, etc., which further help us to understand and explain the complex social world. The next one, self-expressive function. Attitudes are means to define, maintain and enhance the self-worth. Many attitudes express the basic values of the attitude holder and reinforce his or her self-image. Some attitudes represent a person's identification with a particular group. The next one, ego defensive function. The ego defensive function of attitudes refers that we hold attitudes that protect our self-esteem from harm or justify our acts that make us feel guilty. This function involves psychoanalytic principles where people use defense mechanisms such as denial, repression, projection, rationalization, etc. to protect themselves from psychological harm. For example, a player may protect his ego being hurt by his defeat in an inter-school badminton match by developing negative attitude towards match referee. The next section we will see attitude change. Attitude change is a process by which valence of attitude is transformed or changed into the opposite direction. For example, a person who has positive attitude towards atomic weapons may begin opposing it or vice versa. In any democratic country like India, elections are conducted to decide that which political party will form the government for the next years. However, it often happens that the incumbent political party loses the confidence of voters and other party wins the majority of voters' opinions. Thus, attitudes once formed can be changed also. The next we will see cognitive dissonance and attitude change. Cognitive dissonance describes the mental stress or discomfort experienced by an individual who holds two or more contradictory beliefs, ideas or values at the same time, or is confronted by new information that conflicts with existing beliefs, ideas or values. Leon Festinger proposed the cognitive dissonance theory in 1957, which states that a powerful motive to maintain cognitive consistency can give rise to irrational and sometimes maladaptive behavior. According to Festinger, we hold much cognition about the world and ourselves. When they clash, a discrepancy is evoked, resulting in a state of tension known as cognitive dissonance. For example, if you believe smoking is bad for your health, but you continue to smoke, you experience conflict between your belief and your behavior. Since the experience of dissonance is unpleasant, we are motivated to reduce or eliminate it and achieve consonance, that is agreement. Smoking and cognitive dissonance. Smokers often experience cognitive dissonance. They know that smoking is harmful to their health, but they continue to do it anyway. Most smokers elevate their psychological discomfort by adjusting their attitudes towards smoking, towards their health, or both, by saying things such as, I know plenty of 70-year-olds that smoke and they are doing just fine, or I am bound to die anyway, might as well enjoy it. When we experience cognitive dissonance, we are motivated to decrease it because it is psychologically, physically and mentally uncomfortable. We can reduce cognitive dissonance by bringing our cognitions, attitudes and behaviors in line, that is, making them harmonious. This can be done in different ways, such as changing our discrepant behavior, that is, example, stop smoking, changing our cognitions through rationalization or denial, example, telling ourselves that health risks can be reduced by smoking filtered cigarettes, adding a new cognition, example, smoking suppresses my appetite, so I do not become overweight, which is good for my health. Strategies for attitude change. The first one, refuse to repeat the negative thought. Create awareness and try to find out the source of negative thoughts. Finding the source helps to stop it from further growing. Train yourself to stop at the first sign of negative thought and pause. Requires a lot of willpower. Requires deliberate turning from negative attitude or thought. The second one, choose to believe the truth over a negative attitude or feeling. Try to differentiate between how you feel and what is the truth. Try to understand it is your feeling that makes you feel bad. You do not have to make it a negative attitude towards yourself. Say to yourself, it is just how I feel, I am not actually a bad person. Try pausing yourself and stop turning feelings into negative thoughts. The third one, remember to speak as kindly to yourself as you speak to others. Treat others as you want to be treated. People often teach others about the above but forget to implement it on themselves. Ask yourself what I think about self, it is actually true. Someone who knows me well, would he or she have the same thoughts? Would someone else feel good if I would say such things to them aloud? Is it necessary for me to think in such a way? These questions would help one's thinking and feeling a lot and help in change their mindset and attitude. The fourth one, find a reason for which you can be thankful. Many of us cannot find a reason to be thankful for a certain situation and cannot think with a positive attitude about the situation. Carrying a positive attitude in a negative situation is rare and difficult to do, but not impossible. Example, in the situation of COVID-19, everyone is locked in their home and can rarely move out. So, positive thinking, how it could be. I spend time with my family. I got a break from work. I play with my kids and I have some me time. And how negative thinking, I got fired. I want to go out. I don't have enough income. I need peace. Similarly, we need to train our minds to think and react with the positive attitude rather than a negative one in each situation. The next section, we will see emotions. How does it affect our attitudes and behavior? Emotions have great impacts in our life more than we realize. Emotions can affect our attitudes and behavior directly and indirectly. Emotions are short and intense feelings that arise in response to events, objects, or individuals. Emotions are experiences which can change our psychological, physiological states and behaviors that put us in the state of readiness. For instance, when we are happy, our eyes tend to dilate, our smiles are bigger, and consequently the way we treat others will be much better. Further, attitudes are the results of individuals' evaluations which explain why people respond to certain events, ideas, or individuals differently. The difference between emotions and attitudes are emotions involve immediate responses and instantaneously affect our behavior. On the other hand, attitudes are more stable over time as it involves a cognitive process where it considers other factors such as beliefs, feelings, and behavioral intentions toward the external stimulus, that is events, objects, or individuals. The next section we will see attitude behavior link. When individuals focus more on their own attitudes and feelings, they tend to act on those attitudes, and hence attitude and behavior are related. In addition, when individuals feel more responsibility for their own actions as opposed to being part of a group, their attitudes is more consistent with their behavior. Attitude behavior link means the extent to which a person's attitude predicts his or her behavior. Attitudes can positively or negatively affect a person's behavior regardless of whether the individual is aware of the effects. A person may not always be aware of his or her attitude or the effect it is having on behavior. Three things can affect the attitude: strength and attitude, behavior consistency, information, personal involvement, and direct experience with the attitude object. Greater attitude strength and behavioral consistency can be achieved by possessing more information about an attitude object. Attitude refers to how someone feels about something. For example, a student is having a negative outlook towards maths class. A behavior is how someone acts in response to their feelings. For example, the student's actions of skipping maths class. Next section, we can see, can attitudes make predictions? An attitude predicts behavior to the extent that the attitude is strongly held, cognitively accessible, and internally consistent. The first one, attitudes are better predictors when they are strong and stable. Think for a moment about the thousands of attitudes that you hold. Some of these attitudes, perhaps about politics or religion, are very important to you and may even be an essential part of your self-concept. Other attitudes about different flavors of ice cream, for example, are much more tangential and less strongly held. Not surprisingly, it is strong attitudes that are more likely to predict your actions. The second one, the more specific the attitude, the better it will be as a predictor. However, the usefulness of broad attitudes for predicting specific behaviors is limited. For example, one study found that using a general attitude towards birth control to predict which women are likely to use birth control pills did not work very well, but measuring a much more specific attitude towards birth control pills did indeed provide a good predictive power. Similarly, another study demonstrated that attitudes about recycling are much better predictor of recycling behavior than attitudes about environmental issues in general. The third one, attitudes are more useful as predictors when they are accessible to the person. Favorable attitudes by college students towards psychology experiments did not predict actually volunteering to participate in experiments unless the students were reminded of the attitude they had expressed when a call for volunteers was made. In a separate study, students posing as jurors in the mock sex discrimination case were more likely to render verdicts consistent with their attitudes when they were given an opportunity to reflect on their attitudes about affirmative action prior to making a judgment. The fourth one, attitudes are better predictors of behavior for some individuals than for others. There are a number of personality traits that may lead some individuals to be guided by their attitudes more reliably than others. For example, some people are simply higher in something called private self-awareness. Such individuals are more introspective and are constantly monitoring and examining their thoughts and feelings. Consequently, a person who scores high in private self-awareness will be more conscious of the attitudes that they hold, and they will be more attentive to whether their attitudes and their behaviors are in synchrony with each other. We will naturally have more confidence in predicting behavior from an attitude when we are dealing with a highly self-aware person. The fifth one, attitudes are better predictors of behavior when the elapsed time between attitude assessment and the actual behavior is short. A political poll taken 2 days before an election will be more accurate than a poll that was taken 2 months before an election. The longer the amount of elapsed time, the more likely it is that other forces may intervene to alter the impact of an attitude. The sixth one, attitudes predict general patterns of behavior over time better than single instance of behavior. When you observe a person who is environmentally conscious, his actions shows not to use the plastic carry bags in a particular situation, and observation over next 6 months, his action towards avoiding the usage of plastic carry bags gives better understanding of his behavior. Attitude predicts the accuracy of the behavior pattern over long term than observing in a single moment. In short, the evidence is that attitudes can be good predictors of behavior as long as we understand the constraints that they operate under. Predicting behavior over longer periods of time and in precise situations will be best, especially if we are using very specific attitudes that are stable and held with conviction. To conclude this session, thus attitude is used to explain our feelings, thoughts and behaviors for other people, issues, events and situations in our social environment. Attitude change makes the individual to change his attitude towards a particular thing or over a situation. Having a positive attitude over a negative situation makes an individual more confident to handle any of his obstacles in a strong way. To summarize this, attitude is made up of thoughts and ideas, a cluster of feelings, likes and dislikes and behavioral intentions. Attitudes that operate on conscious level are known as explicit attitude. We are aware of their cognitive processing and their impact on our behavior. On the other hand, implicit attitudes operate at unconscious level under control of automatically activated evaluation and are executed in behavior without conscious awareness of the person holding that attitude. People form attitudes either through direct experience or by observing others' attitude. Attitudes once formed can be changed also. That is, attitude change is a process by which valence of attitude is transformed or changed into the opposite direction. Cognitive dissonance theory explains the attitude change. Strategies for attitude change train our minds to think and react with the positive attitude rather than a negative one. Emotions can affect our attitudes and behavior directly and indirectly. Attitude behavior link means the extent to which a person's attitude predicts his or her behavior. An attitude predicts behavior to the extent that the attitude is strongly held, cognitively accessible and internally consistent. Attitudes can be good predictors of behavior as long as we understand the constraints that they operate under. Thus, attitude is used to explain our feelings, thoughts and behaviors for other people, issues, events and situations in our social environment. Thank you.